tube. Then it implants into your uterus. Okay, so then we protect the fertilized eggs. You provide an environment for a viable fetus, providing means for birth, and producing the female sex hormones. Okay, so that's everything that's going down under, everything that's going on. Okay, you're not going to be going over or learning the fertilization process. Okay, we're just looking at strictly things that we're going to be operating on and structures. Okay, we're not going into all that other stuff. All right, so we're going to run through the midterm book as well, but we'll go through the A&P book first. So you can just make sure you have everything you need highlighted. Okay, so chapter 17 in your book. We're going to start on 384. Y'all are still good at home? Okay. So the first structure they talk about are your ovaries. Okay, so we have two ovaries. Of course, you have a left and a right. So it's really important to, when you're doing surgery, sometimes we do, it's abbreviations of RSO or LSO. Okay, when you go into your midterm book, you're going to look at Salping is the tube and Oophorectomy is the ovary. So if it's a Salping oophorectomy, then we're taking the tube and the ovary. Okay. If it's just a salpingectomy, we're taking just the tube. If it's oophorectomy, we take just the ovary, okay? So you have to make sure you understand if it's right or left. So we have two tubes, two ovaries, okay? We have one uterus, some of us. So very important to do R or L. So that way you know if specimen care, we need to make sure we have the right one. So if something happens in pathology, we need to know what side it came out of, okay? All right, so they describe them as almond shaped. All right, little thing that's on the side of your uterus. You don't need to know that they're 3 centimeters long, 2 centimeters wide, and how thick they are. You just want to know that they are a pair, okay? They are located on each side of the superior portion of the uterus. So in a perfect little textbook, they're kind of sitting like you see on the PowerPoint right there. They're real floppy. Everything will kind of sag, on the inside until, of course, we get pregnant and it expands and everything's nice and tight, okay? You need to kind of know the ligament. Let me just make sure we're going. Yeah. Are y'all not hearing me at home? Oh, Sadie says thumbs up. Okay. I'm gonna keep you guys like this, okay? Just follow along in your PowerPoint, okay? All right. So ligament.
I can't hear nothing now.
I don't know if we're supposed to hear anything or not. I don't know. Here?
Can't hear you now.
Yay, nay?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, maybe it's just the way my computer's facing. Okay. All right, so the ligaments. I'm talking about knowing the ligaments that are going to be attached to the structure, okay? So when you're looking at it, I want you to highlight, it says 3 other ligaments keep the ovary in place. You have your broad ligament, your ovarian ligament, and your suspensory ligament, okay? So you need to know those 3 go with that ovary. You have to be able to identify your ligament as well when you're looking at a photo, okay? So looking at, mouse. This picture that's on your first slide where it says ovaries, okay? You have your suspensory ligament, which is going to be at the top. that is suspending it from the pelvic wall. That's why it's basically called a suspensory ligament, okay? Then you're going to have your uterine ovarian ligament. It's mid-term. It's going from your uterus to your ovary. That's what's hanging it, attaching it there. And then you're going to have the broad ligament, okay? So your broad ligament is a big ligament that has a bunch of stuff entailed in it, okay? It's like the wings, okay? When you look at it, it looks like we have wings on both sides of our uterus. The ovary is going to be kind of encased in that as well. The broad ligament is going to be responsible for a lot of structures. So suspensory is coming from the pelvic wall to the top part of the ovary, and then your ovarian ligament is going to go from the ovary to the actual uterus, okay, uteroovarian ligament. And then you have it sitting in the broad ligament, okay? So that's the 3 ligaments you need to understand that go and keep it in its place for the ovary, okay? It goes on to tell you that each ligament attaches to the side of the uterus and the cervix and down to the level of the beginning of the vagina. Okay, so everything is covered in ligament. It says a small fold of peritoneum contains ovarian blood vessels and nerves and the suspensory ligament. So when you're looking at that anatomy photo, whenever it points to ovarian ligament, the suspensory ligament, you're going to notice they show you red and blue, okay, because it has the blood flow to go to that ovary. So whenever we're taking the ovary out, we have to clamp and cut and ligate the arteries and the nerves that are feeding that structure, the ovary, okay? So just like we do intestines and we talked about mesentery and everything, we have to do the same thing with these ligaments. So you're cross-clamping and dividing the suspensory, which has your arteries and your veins and your nerves that are feeding the ovary. Okay, so that's why you have red and blue in those pictures. It says then you have the ovarian ligament, which is attached to the medial end of the ovary, and it allows the ovary to maintain its position. Okay, so you got one from the top hanging and one from the bottom attaching it to the uterus. And then it fits into the broad ligament. So on the next slide that says ligaments, they give you a description of each, kind of tell you where they are, okay, according to that ovary, all right? You do have other ligaments that you're going to read about on your note pages, all right? It says make note of the cardinal ligament and the round ligament that you see on that diagram, okay? So your cardinal ligament is going to be attached to the cervix, which is really low, okay, and you're on your uterus, and it goes to the pelvic wall, and it'll hold the uterine arteries, it says, to provide the primary blood supply to the uterus, okay? This is at the base of the broad ligament. So at the very bottom of it, the broad ligament is basically going to turn into the cardinal ligament, okay? Your round ligament is a ligament that's coming off, and it says it comes from the uterine horns and goes deep into the pelvic cavity. This is the one ligament that stretches out when you carry a child, and you have a lot of side pain sometimes. It gets really sharp. Well, that's round ligament pain, okay? And that's because it's attached to the top of your uterus and all the way down to the bottom of your pelvic floor. And then as your uterus is growing bigger, that round ligament stretches. So that's why it hurts and you have round ligament pain, okay? Your uterosacral ligament, again, med-term. It's from your sacrum to your uterus, okay? That's where the attachment's going to be. And this is also helping keep your uterus in place, okay? So if you look at it, some of them are going to be med-term. So you'll know kind of where they start and stop, where they connect. All right. The round ligament, it's just like a little round tube. It's just a round strip of tissue. Okay. I don't know if that's why they call it round, but that's what it looks like. Fallopian tubes. Okay. We're skipping page 386 and 387 in your A&P books. You don't have to worry about highlighting anything on that. So go straight to 388 and we jump to fallopian tubes. Okay. All right, so fallopian tubes have a couple of different names. I want you to make sure you know all the names for them. So it says they also call them uterine tubes or oviducts. So make sure you're familiar with fallopian tubes, uterine tubes, or the oviducts. All one thing, okay? You will have to know the sections of the tube. So each part of that tube has a different little name to go with it, okay? The tubes are held in place by the broad ligament. So I'll tell you that broad ligament is going to be responsible for quite a few structures to hold everything in place. So looking at the piece of the fallopian tube, okay? The proximal opening, it says, expands. It's called the infundibulum. And then on the edges of the infundibulum, you have what's called fimbriae, okay? That's those little finger-like projections that you see on a tube. That's what's going to, once your egg is released from the ovary, the tube is not really attached to your ovary, okay? It just kind of sits there. And it's almost like a vacuum. So when your ovary releases the egg, the fimbriae are like little fingers that are gonna like kind of suck up that egg and bring it into the tube to travel to the uterus, okay? So fimbriae is gonna be the first little part, okay, when you're looking at the very tips of your uterine tube diagram. Then you have your infundibulum, which is kind of like the Y part, okay? So your fimbriae, then your infundibulum. It goes on to tell you that the infundibulum does not come into contact, like I just said. One little fimbriae will go down there, touch the ovary, and it'll kind of take in the egg. I'm sure you've all heard of like a tubal pregnancy, right? Okay. So whenever the egg gets sucked up into the fallopian tube, it just means that it doesn't travel to the uterus and it stays in that tube, and the sperm has made its way into the uterus and then up the tube. So that's where they met and that's where they fertilized, okay? And the egg tries to implant in that tube, and it can only grow for so long, okay? You can't carry a pregnancy in your fallopian tube, and it's not gonna move to your uterus. So if you have a tubal pregnancy, it's not going to go to term, okay? It's not gonna be able to get fixed. You'll also learn about like tuboplasties, okay, when we do procedures. So sometimes the tube will rupture and we have to go in and repair the tube. Sometimes we can't repair the tube.